Okay, man.
All right. It's a bird, it's a plane, it's a role model. What is a role model exactly? Well, a role model is someone that another person tries to be like. In an interview with Dylan Ratigan on 2011, Grant Morrison, who was a comic book writer, said, "Superheroes model behavior that exhibit resolutions of problems in an honorable way. I support the resolution that Superman is a constructive role model for the youth of America." I'm going to show you why we need role models. Then I'm going to discuss how Superman teaches children things like bravery, humility, and morality. First, I'm going to talk about why we need role models. According to Mark Thomas, who is a human evolutionary geneticist, in an article in Health Guidance in 2014, role models are highly important for us psychologically, help to guide us through life during our development, to make important decisions that affect the outcome of our lives, and to help us find happiness in later life. When we're children, we look to our role models for inspiration, and we use this as a blueprint for our later life. Now I'm just going to discuss how Superman portrays bravery to children. To no surprise that Superman is brave. On June 2013, in an article entitled "Superman, a Role Model for Boys," Nolan James Mule, who has been writing comic books for 20 years, says, "Many may think it's easy for Superman to be brave since he's virtually invincible, but this couldn't be more off the mark. Although he is bulletproof and has super abilities, he's never been completely invulnerable. His foes tend to find something that gets him at a disadvantage. And yet he perseveres. Superman has even faced death itself and still found a way to lead by example with his selfless actions." Now I'm going to show you how Superman teaches children humility. Despite the fact that Superman is the most powerful being in every imaginable reality, he doesn't let his abilities get to his head. He doesn't act selfishly or live extravagantly. In fact, he dresses as an everyday reporter and only puts on the cape whenever necessary. In an interview with Dylan Ratigan, Grant Morrison, comic book writer and playwright, says, "Superman is about humility. He doesn't do it to get thanked, he cares about the people he saves." So I ask you, isn't this a characteristic we want to see in the children who are going to be running the world when we're older? Now I'm going to show you how Superman teaches children morality. Aristotle said that no one starts out virtuous, and it takes practice to become virtuous. So he recommends that children pick a role model, someone who's virtuous already. I say they should choose Superman because he cherishes all life form and would do anything to protect it. He considers himself a defender of the weak. In a 2013 article entitled "Is Playing Superhero Good for Kids?", Rachel Lewis, a mother and graphic designer, shares her belief that there are 5 key concepts that Superman can instill in children. The first is patience. A study by Karina Chung at Wellesley College found that wearing a Superman cape and hearing about his fantastic abilities made preschoolers better able to delay gratification. The second is key concepts. Superhero play helps children to develop concepts of morality such as right and wrong and good and bad. The third is confidence. In the world of superheroes, anything is possible. All that dreamed up play is great exercise for the mind and the imagination. The fourth is helpfulness. Possessing superpowers in a virtual world make people more likely to be helpful in real life. And this is according to a study conducted by the clinical psychologist Robin Rosenberg. The fifth concept is empowerment. Children have very limited control over many aspects of their lives. Becoming a superhero in their play helps them to access some sense of power. So I have proved that Superman is a constructive role model. I've showed you how he teaches children bravery because he himself has faced death and even found a way to lead by example with his selfless actions. I've showed you how he teaches children humility because despite his superpowers, he doesn't live selfishly or extravagantly. I've showed you how he teaches children morality because he cherishes all human life and would do anything to protect it. I stand resolved that Superman is a constructive role model for the youth of America, and this is why I urge you to vote the affirmative. I'm now open to cross-ex.
Okay, Amanda, when you begin by talking about why role models can guide us through our development, I'm assuming you're talking about positive developments, right?
Correct.
Would negative development of a role model be something that's good too or not?
It is not, but that's not what I'm covering here.
I understand that. You're basically trying to say that almost all role models are positive?
No, that is not what I'm stating.
Okay,
I'm just getting at
but
that
Superman is always positive, correct?
for the most part,
Okay,
yes.
as far as a role model, right?
Yes.
In the bravery argument, you indicated that this is role modeling for boys, right?
I didn't specifically say that. That
That's
was just
what
from
the
one of my
evidence
sources.
suggests, not one of the sources, right? Would that seem to preclude or keep out about 51% of the population, which
No,
are
but
women?
he didn't specifically state that it was just for
Yeah,
boys
but the
or
article
girls.
was role modeling for boys, right? So I would seem to imply or infer that is for boys, right? Okay.
Right, but like I said, he didn't say that it was not for girls.
Sure. But he didn't say it was for girls.
You could make that
Okay.
assumption, sure.
Okay. I think it's a very clear assumption the article was written for boys. That's why it's called role model for boys. So now I'm confused. He's virtually invincible but not invulnerable, right? Is that
Right.
How can that happen? You're either invincible or you're vulnerable.
Well, according to the comic book, Superman has one thing that he is vulnerable to, which is kryptonite, and that's
right?
what
I'll
they're
argue that
getting
in a
at.
little bit, right? So, and then in the Amelia argument, he faked his own death.
No, he did not fake his own death.
Okay, I thought something about faking the death.
Faced.
Face death.
Right,
Okay, so
faced.
facing death. Thank you. Then you cite a comic book writer and a playwright
Mhm.
as an example of humility as well,
Correct.
right?
Grant Morrison.
Grant Morrison. Do we know anything more about Grant?
I do in my evidence paper. It's
Comic
just
book
that,
writer, right?
yes, he is a comic book writer. He's been doing this for over 20 years.
So you're linking comic book writing and humility
It,
and role modeling.
along with that,
Okay.
yes.
You mentioned in your morality argument that one of the keys is confidence, right?
Right.
So if you would act like a superhero, in this case Superman, you'd be more confident, right?
Yeah. I would say yes.
Didn't George Reeves, who was one of the first television portrayers of Superman, didn't he kill himself?
I have no evidence that shows
I
that.
believe
I
that
don't
he
know
did.
much
He
about
committed
that.
suicide. He was the first person to play Superman on TV in the TV series.
We're just talking about how
Series?
this affects children, though,
Yeah,
not
yeah,
actors. who
I'm
play
aware
them.
of that, but you're trying to say that basically providing a role model will make you more confident, and now the person who's portraying the actual character itself commits suicide, which would not be very confident, right? I don't know if it's a very good message that the person playing the role model kills himself. Would that be accurate?
Right, but I think that
Thank
children's
you.
development and humans
All
are
right.
different.
Thank you. All set?
Yep.
The ability to leap buildings in a simple bound, or the ability to move faster than a speeding bullet, and to use X-ray laser vision, to me are not attributes of an effective role model. I stand resolved in this debate that Superman is not a constructive role model and should not be construed for the youth of America as such, for three reasons. First of all, he hides his identity, and how can hiding one's identity possibly be role model oriented? Second of all, violence and beating people up is his primary tactic in dealing with the bad people. And third of all, I'd like to argue that the superpowers that he does have are simply not attainable. They're unrealistic. And even though we know it's a fictional character, they're so extreme that they can't be embodied as a role model. So my first point is that Superman hides his identity, and we need transparency in our heroes, and we need transparency in our role models. We need to know who they are. And if we don't know who the person is that we're embodying because they're masking their identity as somebody else, how can that possibly be a role model? Almost all of the bad guys in comic books, in comic series, in movies, and media are all doing things to hide their identity, a lot of times with masks and that type of thing. Superman and Clark Kent do the same thing. They're hiding who their identity is. So I think in most situations we look at negative or anti-role models as the bad guys or as people that hide their identity, which Superman does. Secondly, violence is the primary role model behavior that Superman exhibits. I haven't seen all the Superman movies, but if you go back to the original TV series, anytime that there's a problem somewhere, Superman uses beating people up and crashing through walls and stuff like that and throwing the bad people in jail with physical violence as a primary way of doing that. I don't think that's an effective role model. I don't think that's effective role modeling behaviors when there's a conflict, when there's a situation to use violence to do that. So at this point, if we continue to look at him as a role model, he's basically developing anti-role model or anti-behaviors, and I don't think that's possible. Third of all, almost going back to my transparency argument, when you look at the superpowers that Superman is actually, again, supposed to be emulating, they're simply not attainable. They're simply such a stretch, and they're so far away from even knowing that it's a comic book that I might be able to have the ability to see through a building. There's always jokes about his X-ray vision, for example, and how a young boy might be able to use X-ray vision to look at women. I don't think it's the type of role modeling behavior that we want. The possibility of super strength and attaining that strength, I think, will resort to people using different types of steroids or different types of activities to get this strength. Again, not attainable. It's impossible for one to become fast as a speeding bullet. And I know that these are all metaphors in the media, but I think what you're basically saying is that by looking at a role model with attainable powers that can't be reached, it's impossible to reach toward that level of role model, excuse me. So I just don't think the superpowers are even attainable, and even though I know they're fictional. Okay. Finally, I think the Superman is not a constructive role model because he's hiding, he's using deception, he's lying, he's using violence, and the superpowers that we're supposed to role model are not attainable. Superman is not a constructive role model, fact or fiction, real or fictional, he's not. I'm open to cross-sects.
So, Mike, you say that you think that we need transparency in our superheroes, correct? And you said that
in our role
Superman-
models as well.
Right, and you
I
said
think
that
something more concrete, like a Boy Scout leader. That's
right, and
better
you
than
say
a-
that Superman hides his face and his identity, but Superman is an alien. Are you saying that you would accept someone if they were an alien and came down here and tried
I
to
don't
protect
like
us?
anything
Do you think
alien at all. I
people
don't
would-
think that'd be transparent either. So
Correct. And then the next point that you made,
I can't think of any aliens that are effective role models.
right? But that's not what we're
E.T.,
we're talking about. Superman in general.
Alf, I don't know any
Right.
role models.
And
that
you
are
said that in
effective
TV
aliens.
shows he uses a lot
The
of violence
alien,
and
in
force.
the movie Alien, not a role model.
He uses a lot of violence and force, but do you think that it is necessary sometimes with some of these villains that he needs to?
Absolutely not.
For instance, would our policemen have
If
to
I'm
use
watching, I just blanked at what they are, like the Care Bears, whatever. They're still fighting evil, but they're not like beating
force? So are you
people up.
saying that you think that our policemen do not need to use force with the villains that they're chasing?
I don't think policemen should be looked at as role models when they use violence.
All right. And do you have any
Nor should we
evidence
look
on
at
any of
Superman.
this? And do you have any evidence on any of the claims that you have made today?
No.
Right.
But it's easy to look at each of these. You don't even need any evidence to know that Superman hides his identity. Hiding identity is bad.
Okay, and then you said that his abilities
Superman
were unattainable.
using violence. Violence is bad.
And once again, you have no proof that his abilities are impossible to reach, correct?
I don't think the physiological structure of the human body allows for laser vision.
But we weren't discussing that the children would try to emulate what he is doing exactly, just
Yeah,
they
and
would
that's
look
what
to
we're
him for
trying to do. That's
inspiration.
exactly what you're trying to do is by trying to emulate the role model, okay? What are they emulating?
I disagree. I think they're
His
looking to him
wispy
for just
hair? No, it's
inspiration.
emulating the powers. That's what they want. So
I
you're setting
disagree
up a
with that.
role model which is beating people up. I'm saying you should not do that. That's the resolution. Superman is not a constructive role model. He's not. He shouldn't be looked at.
And once again, you have no evidence to prove that he's not a constructive role model.
I have tons of examples indicating that those powers are not attainable. Violence hides his identity. These are all wrong.
And in my
You need evidence to
speech,
prove
I
something's
had Grant
wrong.
Morrison, who is a comic book writer. I had
Using
Thomas,
a
which
comic
if
book
you've
writer
been-
to talk about role modeling
and then I had
behavior?
an evolutionary geneticist.
What's next? What other more role models? The Green Hornet, Batman. You think those are all wonderful role models as well? Batman hides his
I think
identity
that once
even
again,
more.
they
Why
are
is
role
he
models
wears
that
a
people,
mask?
that children look to for inspiration. I'm not saying that they need to emulate everything
That's
that they
fine,
do.
but again, what we're going to look at, what are the things the kids want to emulate here? They want to emulate beating people up. They want to emulate looking through laser vision. They want to emulate being a speeding. They're not possible.
I disagree with that.
Well, are they possible? Can you develop laser vision? You can't. It's not even something that we should attempt to role model. Role models should be heroes and concrete people, transparent people. I'm out. Or you're out. The key issue in this debate is whether or not we should use a fictional or a realistic character as a role model. And in this case, I'm arguing that Superman, as an example of role model, should not be looked at or construed as a constructive role model. I want to look at a couple of Amanda's arguments, first of all, and then I want to go back and simply say that because he's not an effective role model, he should not be looked at as a role model. In looking at a couple of Amanda's evidence and arguments early on, she talks about psychologically the purpose of a role model is to guide us through our development. I'm fine with that. But what we have here is a negative role model now that's guiding us through our development. So we're teaching negative behaviors. We're teaching deception. We're teaching hiding. We're teaching violence. Those are not things that we should be allowing our role models to guide themselves through. So if the purpose of role modeling is to guide us through development, we don't want this type of development. Second of all, when she looks at all the characteristics from her comic book writer, when is a comic book writer now an expert on role modeling behaviors on bravery and humility and morality? All they simply have is the ability to draw fictional characters which are not effective role models and then get something out of that? No. I don't think you need to look at the first comment about bravery, and I don't care if she says, well, it wasn't written for boys. It's specifically the article was role modeling for boys. Now, how can that infer or imply girls? It can't. So we're setting up a role model for only half of the population? No. I also don't think the role model that we're setting up via Superman in this case, deception, violence, beating people up, I don't think that's the type of role behavior that you want to be emulating in our young children, even in boys. I think we're moving away from that. Okay? And then finally, you have to look at the fact that if she's arguing morality and confidence, even the actor that's portraying this role model committed suicide. And that can't be something which we look to as being a positive role model. We simply can't. So in looking at my own arguments, I believe that because of deception, he's hiding, he's setting up a non-transparent role model. We're not sure who he is or what he stands for. At this point, we don't want that as a role model. You have to look at violence in this debate. You have to look at, he's a violent character. Okay? He's trying to combat evil. He's trying to combat bad, but he's doing that with other bad and other evil. And I don't want that role model to be boys or girls oriented here. So if you're looking at a constructive role model, first of all, this is not constructive, and second of all, he's not a role model. And finally, I think the superpowers and all the characteristics of this particular man, of this particular role model, this particular comic book character are simply not attainable. And I know it's fiction, and I know that. But what we're trying to do here is emulate negative characteristics. We're trying to emulate negative role behaviors with laser vision, super strength, speeding people up. The end result is he's not a role model at all. He's certainly not a constructive role model, and you need to vote against Superman being a constructive role model in this debate, because he's not. Okay, Natalie.
I still stand resolved that Superman is a constructive role model. Mike says that he hides his identity. I say that he disguises himself for the good of mankind. He doesn't want the people associated with him to get hurt. I think that that means that he cares for us, cherishes us. Grant Morrison once again says that he solves many problems with his mind. Yes, he may use force, but he uses the correct amount of force. As I said earlier, policemen are still going to need to use some force, some violence with the criminals that they're chasing. It's how it works. When people are violent, you have to give a little bit of force back. Not saying that the children need to emulate this. And this goes into where Mike was saying that Superman uses violence. I disagree that he uses blunt violence. Once again, I think that he uses the correct amount of force. He cares about all life, and he is here to defend us. He's not trying to just go around and beat up all villains that he finds, willy-nilly, so to speak. So once again, Superman uses the correct amount of force, but children are not trying to emulate this. It's not what we're going for here. They look to him for inspiration. To go back to what Rachel Lewis was saying, that he can instill things like key concepts, patience, confidence, helpfulness, empowerment. These are all very important in the whole view of it, of all of this. And Mike says that he thinks the abilities are unrealistic. This still goes back to how the children are not trying to emulate. They may play, like they have lasers coming out of their lights and they can fly. I have yet to see a child who actually thought that he could fly and actually thought that he could shoot lasers out of his eyes. If he did, his parents need to take him to get checked. So once again, the children are just looking for inspiration. They are not looking to be exactly like Superman. They don't think that they are some wonderful alien being that came from a different planet and shot down here. I just don't think that that's what they're going for. So I stand resolved, once again, that Superman is a constructive role model for the youth of America. I still say that he portrays bravery, morality, humility. He also instills more concepts that my source Rachel Lewis goes into. Thank you.
I would like your ballots back here on 2 separate piles. A reminder, we're not having this class Wednesday.